Ethics in action. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Benjamin Franklin. Do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. Eleanor Roosevelt. The time is always right to do what is right. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1993, one incredibly tenacious woman sought to hold a multi-billion-dollar corporate giant accountable for poisoning the small town of Hinckley, California. Erin Brockovich, directed by Steven Soderbergh in 2000, tells the true story of a single mom living in California who was unemployed, looking for a job, and found herself needing surgery after someone slammed into her car as she proceeded through an intersection. She sued the man who hit her and lost her case, after her attorney promised her it was an easy win. Unable to find employment, she persistently asked, and all but demanded, that her attorney give her a job at his small law firm. He reluctantly hired her as a legal assistant, ultimately making one of the best decisions he could have made for his business. While helping with a real estate case, Ms. Brockovich discovers medical testing and records in the property files. Realizing they seemed out of place, she began looking into their inclusion. During her investigation, she discovers a massive cover-up by Pacific Power and Electric Company, hiding their knowledge of water contamination caused by one of their facility's cooling systems. Ms. Brockovich begins to interview residents in the town and uncovers a mountain of medical problems that town residents are battling, all with direct links to the contamination. She convinces her boss to let her build a case against the Californian giant, ultimately winning the largest class action settlement in U.S. history. Ms. Brockovich's persistence and unwavering dedication to each and every person she fought for won the residents of Hinckley, California, a whopping $333 million. A former beauty queen and Miss Wichita, Erin Brockovich, single mother to 3 young children, Matthew 8, Katie 5, and Beth 9 months, does everything in her power to get the job done. When a car accident leaves her injured and needing surgery, Miss Brockovich finds herself in desperate need for a way to take care of her kids and put food on the table. After losing her case against the man who ran a light and hit her, she gives her attorney a guilt trip, telling him that he made promises they'd win her case and she's desperate. She manages to talk her way into a position as a legal aid without any experience in the field and no law degrees. She is excluded from conversation and lunches by the other women in the office who see her revealing fashion sense as inappropriate and too risky for a law firm. Resilient, the one word that describes Erin Brockovich the best to me. While trying to figure out why there's medical documents and real estate files, she decides to use her fashion and physical attributes to help talk her way into accessing records at the Water Bureau. She takes the information she finds back to her boss, Mr. Masry, and tells him what she discovered: polluted water that's making people sick, and a massive power company buying people's homes to keep them quiet. Miss Brockovich is extremely moved by the stories she learns about Hinckley residents with strange illnesses and cancers. Pacific Power and Electric hired doctors and paid them to tell patients that their medical conditions weren't related. They also went to the residents with pamphlets, telling them the type of chromium found in their water was actually good for them. Ms. Brockovich promised everyone she talked to that she would get to the bottom of what was happening to them and hold PG&E responsible. One of my favorite quotes from the movie I don't need pity, I need a paycheck. And I've looked, but when you've spent the last 6 years raising babies, it's real hard to find somebody who pays worth a damn. Problem identification. In the early 1990s, the legal field was still a very male-dominated profession. Uneducated, divorced single women weren't regularly taking on multi-billion-dollar companies. She was looked down upon by other professionals in the field and even in her own office. She had to find a way to earn a living while making sure her kids were cared for. She met her next-door neighbor, George, when he was outside revving his motorcycle engine after she'd just gotten her baby down to sleep. She went out to yell at him and tell him to shut up, and he was immediately smitten with her. He offered to help take care of the kids while she was working. She didn't understand why he'd offered to help her and was rather apprehensive about trusting a biker with her children. She was out of options and took a chance because she needed the help. She really wanted to be there with her kids, who missed her and were often angry about her absence, but she knew that she was on to something really important and felt compelled to help the people of Hinckley. Trusting that they were safe with George and well cared for was a big hurdle to jump for her. She was tasked with finding connections between the illness being suffered and the hexavalent chromium the power company was dumping into unlined holding tanks. The toxic chemical was used as a rust inhibitor and wasn't stored properly. They knew it was leaking and poisoning the groundwater. She just needed to find the smoking gun. Proof that the corporate office knew about what was happening in Hinckley and that they covered it up and made quick real estate purchases in Hinckley to help keep people from investigating. When the law firm she worked for recruited another attorney to partner on this case, the residents didn't trust him and didn't want to listen or agree with anything he suggested. Ms. Brockovich had promised the residents a trial, but the attorneys felt the only good option in this case was getting a settlement through arbitration. Taking the case to trial could mean a possible loss, or it dragging out 10 to 15 years before anyone saw any money awarded after a win. Everyone in town was angry and felt like they'd been lied to and wanted a jury trial. Ms. Brockovich worked ceaselessly and built relationships with the residents, and she knew many of them didn't have that much time to wait for the money they desperately needed and deserved. She went door to door to tell them she wouldn't give up and would do everything it takes to win this for them. They trusted her word and believed she may be the only person who cared enough to help them. It took an incredible amount of effort to convince everyone to agree to arbitration, that was set to be a guaranteed amount between $50 million and $400 million. Ms. Brockovich had to sacrifice a great deal to help the people of Hinckley, California. She missed out on a lot with her children. Her being gone all the time to interview people and gather information led to a lot of strain on her relationship with George. She had to fight the desire to be home with the need to work on the case. The American Counseling Association's foundation principles also apply to the way in which Ms. Brockovich approached her work on this case, the ACA 2014. She respected every plaintiff's autonomy, and she approached everyone with a sense of justice. She upheld the principles of beneficence and non-maleficence by working to do right by everyone involved, while causing no harm. She also maintained fidelity, continuing to stay committed to her promises. Ethical or moral theory. According to the McCombs School of Business, 2024, utilitarianism is an ethical theory that asserts that right and wrong are best determined by focusing on outcomes of actions and choices. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. In the Hinckley, California case, Ms. Brockovich worked in accordance with the utilitarian ethical theory. She decided what she believed was right, making a tremendous number of sacrifices with her own family to do the most good for the most people. She let her boyfriend care for her kids and didn't get much time with them, while she focused on helping an entire community. She sacrificed her own happiness and relationship, knowing that her efforts would pay off. She did the best she could to manage the frustrations felt by her kids while making sure all their needs were met while working on the case. Potential courses of action. When she couldn't find work and went to her attorney asking for a job, she could have taken no for an answer, but she was relentless and continued pestering him to hire her. Ms. Brockovich could have walked away from the case when Mr. Masry told her it was too involved and would cost too much money. She could have listened and agreed that it would have been too much to take on without any experience. She could have quit her work on the case when George, her boyfriend, gave her an ultimatum and told her it was the case or him. He told her he couldn't do it anymore and wanted her around, and she needed to choose him or her work. Colleague consultation. I consulted with Erica Mai, a member of my cohort, about the film and her take on the actions of the Pacific Power and Gas Company, as well as the choices of Ms. Brockovich made. Erica believes that Ms. Brockovich followed the utilitarian theory, doing the most good for the most people and least amount of harm to George and her kids. This was from Personal Communication, April 11th, 2024. Erica said she would have made the same choices to investigate and work on the case, knowing that George was taking really good care of her kids. They were fed, safe, and had fun with him. They may have missed their mom, but she was ultimately working hard to better their situation. Her efforts led to a real job that made a big difference in their circumstances and improved everyone's lives. Ms. Brockovich got a new, reliable car from her boss and a $2 million bonus check that made it all worth it. Erica said the benefits outweighed the costs and sacrifices made. She would have looked at the costs and how it affected her family in comparison to what she had to gain by taking the job and working so many hours. Thanks for your help on this one, Erica. Potential consequences. If Ms. Brockovich had continued looking for another basic entry-level job that she was qualified for, she would have continued having financial hardship. She just didn't have the skills needed to make a stable, livable wage at that point in her life. This could have led to more financial instability and possible housing insecurity. If she gave up when Mr. Masry told her the case was too big, all of the people of Hinckley would have been faced with suffering these illnesses alone. No one else would have made the connections or found the proof that led to the biggest settlement in U.S. history. None of those people would have gotten the money they so desperately needed from PG&E. She also wouldn't have showed her kids that hard work and dedication pays off. If she had chosen George when he gave her the ultimatum, she would have had more time with him and her kids, but I believe that she would have lost respect for herself. And everyone else would have lost respect and faith in her as well. She told George this was the first time she'd had people really respect her and listen to what she had to say. Decided course of action. Ms. Brockovich spent 3 years of her life investigating the cover-up by PG&E and collecting evidence, building the case against them. She chose to take George up on his offer to let him help her with the kids during that time so she could work. She was met with continual obstacles but found creative solutions to get the information she needed and make a solid case against a money-hungry, massive corporation that was intentionally lying to people and continuing to hide their knowledge of the levels of toxicity in Hinckley water. She went house to house, talking to people about their story, their health, what the doctor told them, what PG&E told them, and the ways in which their health continued to deteriorate. She made sure everyone knew that she cared about them and their family, and that she was dedicated to her core to making PG&E pay for their atrocious negligence. Outcomes. Sacrificing time at home with her children and her next-door neighbor boyfriend, George, she made the incredibly tough decision to work tirelessly to discover the truth. Her work demands placed a great strain on her family life and her relationship, ultimately causing George to break up with her. Her relationship didn't survive, but her self-respect did, and her relationship with George, he stayed in her life. And no matter what she faced, she never gave up, and she dedicated her life to getting more than 600 plaintiffs the big win they deserved. She felt she had to speak up for all those people because no one else was doing it, and many of them were running out of time, dying from their illnesses. Ms. Brockovich not only gained respect from the people in Hinckley, but her efforts also gained them a $333 million payout. The firm she worked for, Masri and Vidito, received $133 million for their work. Her life was forever changed by this case. She was no longer a struggling single mom, barely keeping a roof over their heads. She became a media personality, TV host, and is the president of Brockovich Research and Consulting now. Morals and values. Ms. Brockovich was compelled to help hold the massive power company accountable for contaminating an entire town's water supply. The more people she interviewed, the more cases of cancer and other mysterious illnesses discovered, the more she knew she had to do absolutely anything it took to get justice for everyone living in Hinckley. So many kids were sick from the water, so many parents struggling with their own health. It was unacceptable, and Ms. Brockovich was determined to do something about it. When it came to light that the corporate office knew what was going on, she was overwhelmed at their lack of ethics. Doing the right thing, treating people with kindness, and protecting them from harm were all guiding forces in Ms. Brockovich's decisions. I believe that she thought about her own kids and how hard she'd work to protect them and fight to see that they got everything they needed. The financial burdens placed on Hinckley residents were massive, and she knew the right thing was making those responsible for this devastation pay for their sins. The settlement didn't erase what had been done. It didn't cure the sick and dying. It didn't bring back anyone who had already crossed over or give back time to those who were losing it. But it did hold Pacific Power and Gas accountable, proving to the world that massive corporations couldn't hide their greed behind real estate acquisition, pamphlets loaded with blatant lies, and doctors for hire. Her diligence made a monumental difference in the lives of more than 600 people affected by a multi-billion-dollar giant. This case set a precedent that paved the way for similar cases in the United States. Oftentimes, problems seem too big, too insurmountable to make a difference. Erin Brockovich tells the story of one inspirational woman who never accepted that she couldn't change history. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Here's my references. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this little excursion in Erin Brockovich's story about ethics and morality. Thanks. Take care.